Great. We might have a few more folks that trickle on, so we'll go ahead and get started, just being mindful of time. And want to welcome everybody to our webinar today, which is in partnership with Culture Amp. I'm Dana Childress. I'm with the Leading Edge team, and I'm excited to have you all here to kick off our series on after survey actions. We have heard a lot of questions on survey seasons past of better understanding what exactly engagement is. So we really wanted to center the first of our sessions in July on really foundational information, and we are starting with better understanding engagement. And I'm really excited to be here today with my partner and colleague Liz and Leah from the Leading Edge team to share a little bit more about understanding engagement. So I will take us through to the next slide and tell you all a bit about what to expect. So for those of you who had a chance to join us at our What's Next call at the beginning of June, before we actually shared the survey results, we shared a bit more about what the overall arc of our survey season is looking like this year. And so we know at this point, you all have been sitting with your results for a couple of weeks. And so hopefully you're getting acquainted with those. Maybe you've had some conversations with some of your teammates, but maybe you're not quite ready to have those conversations because you want to understand a bit more. So as you are either undergoing your consultations or preparing for your consultations, we are excited to offer this suite of workshops to focus on after survey actions. You understand your data, and now here is a set of things that you can do to ideally drive your workplace culture forward. So that's where we are today. And so on the next slide, I'll share with you all just a preview of what the arc of those offerings will look like. So we are here in this June and July bucket. As I shared in June is when we launched the series with our What's Next call and then sharing our survey data with you. Now we are in engagement and understanding your data. This is the first of 3 calls that we are hosting in July. Today, we're going to dig into what is behind engagement. Next week, we're going to go even deeper into engagement and do some more kind of custom application to what this looks like for the Jewish nonprofit space, as well as some dialogue. And then for August and September, we will pivot to some other topics, including hiring and recruiting and compensation. So just excited to have you all here today and to kick this off. A couple quick logistical notes. We have everyone muted, but we have a relatively small group today. So we are happy for you all to come off mute. If you have a question, you should also feel free to use the chat. We will be monitoring the chat, but we will also reserve some time for questions at the end. We are also wanting to get your feedback on what you're taking away from these sessions so we can continue to make sure that our offerings feel really relevant and responsive to you. And so at the end, we will drop a link to a quick feedback form in the chat, and we hope you can take a couple minutes just before you log off today to give us some quick feedback. So with that, I'll turn it over to Liz.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So it's nice to see you all. My name is Liz Colhane. So I am the dedicated people scientist here at Culture Amp on this account. So what that means is I get to work with Dana and Leah and many other folks within your organization to think about what are we asking on the survey, what are we looking for at the survey, what do these results mean? And the reason I do this is because I have a background in industrial organizational psychology. And so my goal here is to walk you through and kind of provide to you the overview of the results we found. And why can I do that? That's because I'm qualified to talk about this because at Culture Amp, we have real-time feedback coming in. So as you can see, we were started over 10 years ago. And as of today, we're one of the market leaders in employee experience. So what we're able to do is provide a platform that has the software to gather feedback from employees so that we can understand the entire employee experience, and that also employees can give feedback to one another. And as you can see here, we have over 5,000 companies that have done that. And what that means for us is that we're able to do these things such as benchmarks. So we're able to compare your data with how you're doing in comparison to, for example, the US, and in comparison for how you're doing, for example, across nonprofits. And so as we dive into this today and why we're here, I want to start by leading this presentation by giving you a quick overview of what your results for your organization are. But I want to be really clear on this is that you all have a separate results, right? So what I'm presenting to you is going to be the overall results for Leading Edge. So these are going to not necessarily always be specific to you and what you all are doing at your organization, but they'll give you an idea of where Leading Edge as a whole is. And my goal for this will be for you to walk away with a better understanding of not only what engagement is, but why and how we measure engagement, as well as how to interpret those results. So I'm going to start by giving you all just a high-level overview of what we found in your survey. Then we're going to go into some background information on engagement, and then we're going to end it with, what do we do with these results? What is that focus area? And as Dana said, it is a small group. So even though it is small, I only see a few of your faces across the top. So I might not see if you're raising your hand or having a question. I know Leah and Dana are going to be monitoring the chat, but feel free to cut me off mid-sentence, ask questions, because at the end of this, my goal for you is to walk away with a better understanding of what to do and what engagement is and why we spend so much time on it. So please feel free to interrupt and hop in and ask questions. And even if you don't want to do it mid presentation, we're happy to do it at the end as well. So who are we as an organization? Well, as you all know, and as I was mentioning, we're going to be doing the overall results. But you all actually have over 330 organizations within there. There's folks on many different budget sizes and many different locations. And there's many different organizations that have, for example, varying participation rates. So I want us to keep all of that in mind, and that this is who you are as an organization, but who we're providing the results on today is at an aggregate level. So again, just wanting to reiterate that. So if you were hopping into your results and you were seeing different, for example, focus areas or different levels of engagement, that is why. So let's go ahead and talk about engagement, and let's talk about here what and how we measure engagement. So as you can see, first starting off with it, you have your overall score, which is at 75%. To give you context, when I'm looking at a survey results, I'm really, really hopeful that as an organization, you're at that 70% mark. So as you can see, you are exceeding that area. And I wanted to also highlight that you actually all as an organization have increased 5% since last year. So when we start to say, was there a meaningful change in the actions that we took from a survey? We want to see if there's a 5% or more increase. Or if there's a decrease, we would say that's meaningfully as well. So we will show that you have meaningfully increased since your last survey. And again, when we're looking at engagement, we can think about it as these three components. So the first component here is that advocacy piece, feeling I'm proud to work for my organization and feeling that you would recommend working for an organization. Just to orient you with what I'm providing here, this is the percent favorable. So it's on a 5-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Favorable is going to be those that put agree or strongly agree. Here's your score from this year. Here are your results from last year. And then here is if you have an external benchmark. And an external benchmark, again, for this one here, is showing it in comparison to the United States overall. So this is many industries. This can be from healthcare to retail to finance. So sometimes it's not always that easy to know how you're really doing when you're quite different than that. Again, your results are going to show those overall results in comparison to the US, but what I wanted to also provide you just to kind of level set and give you a comparison, when we look at nonprofits within the United States over the past 12 months, the average score of engagement is 71%. Again, you all are at 75%. To give context here, for feeling proud for an organization, the external benchmark is 90%. Recommending is 81%. Being motivated is at 69%. And seeing themselves work at the organization in 2 years is at 62%. So this just kind of level sets where you're at with that. Again, going back and looking at the results that were specific to you, when we're looking at what people are saying about the organization, we're looking at that feeling proud and recommending. It is typical for organizations to score higher in this area, and it's particularly common to see this in nonprofits as well. And just to give you a little bit more context, when we're going through the results, I was able to look through the comments to kind of get a better idea of what folks were saying about this. So when we were looking at the comments on, I feel proud to work for my organization, We had comments, and this is actually a direct quote. They said, "It's more than pride. It feels like an honor. It's the best place I've ever worked for. We're mission driven." So those were some of the positives. Then, of course, we have those that scored unfavorable, and we were seeing, recently decreasing in the past year or two, a need to take more of a progressive approach. So digging into those comments can kind of show you both sides of where folks are falling within that. And they can also allow you to see what's really happening within the organization. Same idea with the recommendation. We see a lot about this that wasn't really uncommon. Is people are like, well, it depends on the department or the team that I work for or the manager that would be under. There was also comments, which makes a lot of sense for your organization. It's a specific culture. So this isn't necessarily the right fit for everyone. So maybe that's why there's some hesitation to recommend. All of this just, again, giving it context. That second component of engagement is motivation. So here my organization helps me stay motivated to do my best work. When we think about this, the number one driver we saw was that it is my direct manager and my teammates that keep me motivated. So it was very clear from looking at your results that people are very driven by their immediate team and have a strong connection with them as well. And then this item, when you're looking at it, you can see here, I see myself working here in 2 years' time. This is a really helpful item because it gives context into that long-term commitment. This is actually our number one predictor of actual turnover. So when you were going into your results, you can actually look at that unfavorable comment area and you can say, okay, with those folks that scored unfavorably, if we were to do nothing with these results, so not saying this will happen, but let's say it's 10%. If we were to do nothing with the results of this survey and nothing within our organization were to change, in the next year or two, we could expect around 10% turnover. But what's even more helpful with that is you can actually go down and look to see where are the differences. Is it between males and females? Are there differences across the department? And it really can give you some more information into that. So this again is just giving us our overall of engagement. And I also want to speak about not only engagement, but talk about what's increased, what's decreased, what stayed the same, and what does this really mean? Again, so if we think back to what I was mentioning before, anytime there's that 5% increase or decrease, we will say it has meaningfully increased or decreased, or meaningfully changed, I'm sorry. And so as you can see here, there were 3 items that have meaningfully increased across your organization. We see that motivation piece that we were just talking about in engagement, having enough people to be there, and speaking up. If someone in a leadership, if you felt like your values were compromised. This is really that psychological safety component of your organization. So as you can see, these are the things that have changed since last year. What we can see where there's been a decrease is folks being held accountable for their results, their manager helping them do their best, and the systems and processes generally support getting their work done. So again, this is showing you that high and low, but you're also going to notice there's a big chunk right in the middle that hasn't changed. And when we think about that and we look at those results, it's not necessarily a negative or a positive. Those are just some of those areas that are just haven't made changes. There hasn't been anything different about them from last year to this year. And overall, we're not really seeing those big jumps. So an example of this could be, for example, learning and development. Let's say we don't do anything with that as a program, we keep it the same. We would tend to expect those scores to stay the same. So again, the concern isn't necessarily if it's changed or not changed, but we want to be aware when we're looking at our results of what's decreased or increased, just have an idea of what's happening. But again, we're going to get into the specifics at the end of where to focus. And just because something's decreased or is a low score doesn't always mean that's the most effective place to take action. So we'll talk about that as well. So hopping into further of what really is engagement. Well, engagement at a very high level is simply more than how satisfied or happy someone was at their work. So I think at a very simple level, that might be the way we think about engagement. Like if we're happy at the organization, then we must be engaged. But it's possible to be satisfied or happy within your job, but not actually be invested in it. So for example, I can be really, really satisfied with my job because I'm paid a lot and I don't have to do too much. But that's not necessarily ideal for our employees to strive, to want to achieve their best. It's also much different than the construct of job satisfaction. So job satisfaction is something that we can think about over time. So if I am satisfied at my organization, or I'm satisfied at one job, I'm most likely to be satisfied at another job as well. But what engagement is it's more fluid. It's also more than one item. It's more than that, I have a best friend at my organization, or I would recommend it. So when something is as complex as engagement, one of the best ways to do that is to assess it from multiple levels. So that's why we look at that from those multiple questions that we were talking about as well. And we make sure that we're getting that personal, emotional, and mental investment when we think about it. So as you can see here from our definition up here, which I won't read to you because you can see it right up here, but it's representing all of those different areas. And this concept is looking at much more, again, than just how enthusiastic we are about our work. So if we go into, okay, we know what engagement is, we know what it's not, but what does it really matter to you all as an organization? Oftentimes we look at the initiatives in this, science space, and, a lot of folks will be very skeptical to think, oh, this is just the soft, fluffy survey stuff. But we want to say, what does it actually really mean to the organization so that we can get buy-in from our leaders to have an understanding of why it's important. And we were actually able to do a lot of really robust research here at Culture Amp to look at some of the outcomes of engagement that we can see in relation to things that organizations care. So this one that you're looking at right here was over 600 companies that used the engagement survey over a 12-month period here at Culture Amp. And they also had at least 10 ratings on Glassdoor. So the first question we wanted to ask when we were looking at this data was whether there was a relationship between our engagement index score and what their overall Glassdoor rating was. And as you can see here, the answer was yes. So if you have a highly engaged company, you have a far more favorable Glassdoor rating as well. So our data suggests that understanding engagement levels in your organization can help you understand how your company is going to be perceived externally. So again, we talked about how it's perceived internally with ourselves about recommending or being prideful, but here it is at that external relationship as well. So when we seek this richer feedback, we can understand larger concepts and implication from external perspectives, like this example here at Glassdoor. But engagement isn't just something that's going to have this overall positive impact on the organization. Being engaged is also something that's going to be beneficial to not only you, but to your individual employees as well. So firstly, many of the organizational benefits are going to have that reciprocal benefit for the employee. So let's think about this. As your organization performs well financially, there's more likely going to be opportunities for promotions, progressions. There's going to be development. There's going to be training. There's going to be additional opportunities, as well as being able to attract better talents because you're going to be recognized in the industry. You're going to be able to offer this benefit to those folks coming into your organization. So it creates this atmosphere where you have these really talented and strong colleagues that everyone gets to work with. And all of this is creating this cycle of wanting folks not only to come into your organization, but stay at your organization as well. It's also associated with that job satisfaction or that flow with how the work is likely to rise. So if we think about a time that we've been really, really engrossed in something that we're doing and we love it, it won't feel like work. And employees who are engaged feel a connection with the work they do and they're invested in it. This means that they're more committed to it and it doesn't feel like something that's more of a task. It feels like something that they want to do. And employees who are more engaged with their work also tend to perform better than employees who are not engaged, right? That makes sense because you're having that link to higher productivity, that higher link to motivation. It's also helping you as an individual achieve your own career goals. So by meeting all your objectives and performing strongly, then you're going to be setting yourself up for that next progression or that next development or that next training that you're seeking here. And then lastly, engagement is also associated with positive health. So we've looked at the research, and you have, these feelings of joy and enthusiasm and vigor, which all translates to spillover outside of the workplace, like more positive lifestyles, better physical health. If you leave work not feeling drained and you're more engaged, or more likely to go out and do something physical, if you're not having that burnout, that exhaustion. So one of the things that we actually found within our research here at Culture Amp is that engaged employees were 5 times less likely than those employees that weren't to have a safety incident at work. And they were 7 times less likely to have lost time at work due to a result of that safety incident as well. So why does the employee experience always matter to the bottom line? Well, ultimately, it's because it drives results. So, there we go. Because research shows that more engaged employees are going to perform 15 to 20% better. We also know that you're going to have higher customer satisfaction. You're more likely to be, again, hitting that productivity, that performance. As I mentioned just a few seconds ago, that 1 in 5 fewer accidents and 27% less absenteeism. And most importantly, to a lot of organizations, is that you're 5 times less likely to leave that organization. So as we know, as an organization, retention is really important in ensuring that we aren't spending our time, our resources on constantly trying to retain or replace employees. So with the current state of the environment right now, it's very complex. The economy is a mess. We know that some companies are collapsing, others are having this unimaginable success, right? But no one feels really that confident about whether tomorrow there'll be this recession or recovery, or are we going to really be sitting in the same level of uncertainty? So that means that many leaders we're seeing across Culture Amp are actually cutting back or holding on to reserves just to prepare for the unknown. So more is being demanded of high performers to thrive in this moment because we're not sure when it will end. And while the situation is hard enough, we also have found through our research that fewer personal resources, whether that be interpersonal, financial, or emotional, those are less than usual because people have had to battle this pandemic for multiple years, the changing in the economy. So we're asking more of people and they're having these less resources. So what we know with this, there we go. What we know with this is that that's going to drive up costs and reduce profits. Again, our goal here is to ensure that the reduction of that performance and losing high performers and that trust and collaboration on the inclusion efforts is not lost as well. This is what we see when we're not attacking and what we're not doing what we should be for that current environment. And here at Culture Amp, we look at job performance, as you can see, from multiple perspectives. So we look at it at this combination of ability, environment, and motivation, and then what's working versus what's not working. And we know that one of the ways that we get to this is through job performance, is through things that amplify it. Ways that amplify it that we have found in our research is, for example, communication among teams and departments. We also see this with team cohesion. You can see here the amount of scoring higher on those that were higher performing teams on their engagement scores than those that were not. But what I also want to point out here, that when you're looking at your research in particular, one of the ways that you all can look at this is through your organizational alignment items, which look at the individual, the team, and the organizational components. And it really ties into how well your organization is performing and where there's discrepancies, if there are within your areas, between each of those levels. So it really gives us that better understanding of where that performance is not only having efficiencies, but possibly where it's having some frictions as well. So let's get into the engagement survey design. We know that it's really important to measure this correctly because we are measuring this very important construct. And as I mentioned, because it's complex, we don't want to do that with only one item. So how we do that is thinking about it as an outcome. So when we're walking you through these results today and walking you through what those focus areas are, I want you to think about outcomes as something that we can't actually impact. And what I mean by that is I can't make someone proud to work for your organization. I can't make someone recommend your organization, right? But what I can do is see what that outcome is and see what's driving that. So when we're looking at this as an outcome and we're using that verbiage, which you'll see and you'll probably hear when you're going through your results, think of that as the result of things and the thing that we cannot actually change. And engagement should also, as we mentioned, of course, measure those multiple items because it is a complex construct. But at the same point, we don't want to measure everything. So what does that mean? It means that we did a lot of research, we looked at many different areas, and we wanted to make sure that if we were to add additional items onto how we measure engagement, they weren't incrementally adding anything on to what that outcome was. And that allowed us to be confident that we were measuring a holistic view of engagement. And all the questions, of course, that we want to look at are what might actually impact engagement. But again, you can't look at everything. So this is just highlighting really quickly those 5 engagement items that we use. The only item that you all did not use as an organization was I rarely think about looking for a job, but we did have that commitment. So you were still looking at all 3 components of engagement. So I won't spend too much time looking here since we kind of went over this with your results, but just as a reference for you all, especially if you're looking back at this, this is just the standard templated items. But what I wanted to also hop into was, there we go, was as we were mentioning, that's the outcome. So what we want to think about is what's actually driving or what can we action upon? And so how we do this is by looking at these 45 different questions and they're into these different factors. So as you can see here on this side, here are all the different factors that we have and the ways in which we look at them. Again, there could be many different areas that are also impacting engagement, but our goal when we're looking at what's a driver of engagement is making sure that it's something that if we see it's a focus area or somewhere that is impacting engagement or the employee experience, that there's the ability to take action upon it. Because I will say this over and over, people do not get tired of taking surveys. They get tired of taking surveys and action not being taken place. So the worst thing we can do is give folks a survey, then tell us this area that's just horrible within the organization, but we can't actually action or make any changes on it. So that's why we go through the items, we make sure that the questions that we're asking upon are relevant to your organization and that they have the ability to action upon them as well. And again, we could add different areas. For certain organizations, we can always add custom items if there's areas that we want to look at as well. But this really gives us that holistic area of covering those top areas that research has found across the idea. So when we look at the driver analysis, it is a statistical relationship which tells us what's having the best relationship. And so this is a great example of this burrito. So this is the idea to kind of put this into terms of an everyday example. You go to the store, you buy a burrito and you're not happy. If someone is asking you like, are you satisfied or you're not, those are the items that are the outcome, right? We can't do anything about them. But if we get more specific and we ask them, well, what were you dissatisfied about? Was it the fact that it took too long to get your burrito? Was it the fact that we ran out of guacamole? Was it this? Was it that? What we can find is that maybe when we were doing this survey, the drivers of why you were dissatisfied with that burrito were actually because we were out of guacamole at our restaurant. And you only like burritos because you get to have guacamole with them. And you actually didn't mind how long it took to do it because you just had to go back to work. And so the longer you were there, the less you had to work. And you actually find out that that wasn't a driver at all. It was the guacamole. So this is just kind of showing you that relationship of the importance of how you actually take action but also how you prioritize while you take action. Because let's say we asked 6 questions about why they didn't like the burrito, and the manager was hypothesizing this. Well, we found out that 4 of those actually didn't have an impact. We want to make sure that that restaurant is not spending time on those 4 actions that aren't having an impact on the experience the customers are having come in there. Because like you all, this restaurant doesn't have unlimited time, doesn't have unlimited resources. So what this organization needs is someone to pinpoint what is going to change the overall experience for the customers to go from dissatisfied with this burrito to satisfied. Again, at a very simple level, but it just kind of gives you that idea as well. Which leads me into, what are you going to be looking at when you, when you see your results? I kind of just wanted to walk you through not only what you can expect to see, but also what those slight differences are so that you can start to think about, how do I interpret these results? So when you're in the platform, you're going to have a focus area, an impact, you're going to have your question, you're going to have the category, you're also going to have your scores, you're going to have the comparison, all of that. But what I want to point out to you is, what's the difference between that impact and that focus area, so that we can help guide you into what you do with these results. So at the very basic level, the impact, the item, is the relationship that this item has with your overall outcome. So for example, this item, I believe there are good career opportunities for me, is highly correlated, or that relationship is strong between this item and engagement. So statistically, what that means, as one item increases, as this increases, theoretically, engagement will increase as well. The impact analysis can go from not applicable all the way up to high impact, very high. So we're going to see that. So why is that important? Well, because we have this focus area, which is going to take into account the impact, that correlation, in relation with the favorability scores and with that benchmark. So it's taking all 3 of those together and creating an algorithm to say, here are the 3 areas, and you would be able to sort on this. And so it would show you those 3. Here are the 3 areas, looking at learning and development and innovation would be your 3 areas, that if you were to put your time and resources in, are going to have the biggest impact on the employee experience. So as you increase those, we're going to increase the employee experience. Why this is important is because, let's say you get to innovation and we're like, okay, well, you know what? Right now we have, let's say you're a government contract. We have to follow orders for A, B, and C. And we, unfortunately, with this new project, can't really act on any new ideas because we have to stick to this. And we can't think outside of the box. So what you want to do then, let's say you still want a 3rd focus area. When you sort this focus area, you will also be looking at the impact. And the reason this impact is important is because if you're picking an area outside of the focus area, you want to make sure that that impact is not, not applicable, very low, or low. Because what does that mean? It means that area doesn't have an impact on engagement, which means even if you were to, for example, let's just imagine this was low, even if you were to encourage innovation through some of your initiatives, it's not going to actually change the engagement score. So while you're improving that area, it's not improving your employee experience. So you want to make sure you're focusing on an area that's really applicable and going to have a great return on your investment for your time and your resources that you're putting towards it. This just ensures that we're focusing on the correct areas and that we have that moving of the needle of engagement. And just to give context, when we think about, those incremental changes, yes, we're looking for those 5% increases. For example, believing there are good career opportunities. We would want to see that trending upwards, even if it's not trending at that 5% increase, it could still be having an impact on engagement. And the relationship between engagement and turnover is huge. So what our research shows is as engagement increases 1%, turnover actually decreases by 0.7. So when we start to think about those little changes that we're doing along the way with this, I don't want us to get discouraged if we see changes happening slower than we're anticipating, as long as we're going in that correct direction. So again, I just want to remind everyone that this is at the aggregate level. So this is not for your specific area, but these are the 3 areas that populated for leading edge. So we had there's open and honest two-way communication, being kept informed about major decisions, and employee well-being being a priority at the organization. So when we're looking at these, we think about these actually when we were looking through the comments, these were really related. So this is really about making sure that when decisions are being made at the organization, when it is available, that folks are being provided that transparency and that it's being communicated. And so when you're going through your results, let's say that, we see at my organization, there's open and honest two-way communication as a focus area. What I would suggest you do is looking into seeing where that disconnect is. Is that disconnect from leadership and communicating down? Is it from individual contributors pushing that communication up? Where is that disconnect happening? And that will also help you figure out where and how to improve on those areas. We also looked at employee well-being and how that can be an impact on your overall engagement score as a driver as well, and looking at seeing where those results were. And I'm just pulling up those comments because when we were looking in those areas, what we can do within that as well, there was a lot of conversation here on how it is gotten better over time. So again, this is an area of focus, but there's a lot of conversation about how it's gotten better. There is a lot of talk about necessarily how it is less on the action, but more on the talking about. So we start to see some of those emerge as well. And again, just giving context on this, this is that US benchmark. So again, it is encompassing groups that are not specific to you all as well. So I am going to pause real quick and pass this over to Dana. But before I do, I think we're going to open it up for questions in case anything came up. So I can open up the chat too and see if there's any in there. Oh, and one thing I wanted to also point out, which I totally forgot, and I just thought about it as we were doing this, is as you're looking at your focus areas, one of the great new features, and I meant to call this out as the first thing, and I always stray away and not look at my notes, and I forgot to mention it. So it's so important. When you're in there for your organization, let's say you're company A, and you have 7 departments under you. If those 7 departments, or even if 2 of those departments have more than 25 folks that have completed the survey, you can actually filter the report on the left-hand side and select what department you want to look at, and you can see what focus areas are specific for that department. So that will be super helpful when you think about action planning in terms of, do we want to take a centralized, a decentralized approach, or maybe it's a combination where as an organization, you're looking at one overall focus area, and then each department has one that's focused specific to their department. And then from there, did you want to go even further? So I just wanted to point out, this is a new feature that we didn't previously have. And I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable in using it. And if you have any questions, definitely let us know, because we can show you how to filter on that. It's super useful in getting even deeper into your results and looking at it at a more granular level.
Yeah, thanks so much, Liz. And for folks who are on the call who are either a CEO or a survey liaison, you should have received an update about this about a week ago, right before the July 4th break, because we know that in the past, this has been more generic or aggregate data that is driving the impact. So that whole section that Liz just went over, where you could actually see if investing in professional development actually is going to be impactful for your employees, like you can do that by any specific group. So we're hoping it will be really useful to people. We sent the same information to consultants. So if you have questions about that, that can be something you can bring up in a consultation and go through that view to go a little deeper.
Perfect. So let's open it up for questions. So if anyone has any questions on whether it's your results on the platform or anything really engagement related, please come off mute. We definitely have time to open this up. Any questions? Well, I can pass it to you, Dana, if you want. And
Yeah.
then if anyone wants to come up.
I have a question. So we are a very small organization, only 6 staff members, and we had 100% participation and we got our survey results, but because we're so small, I think we did not get any comments. And I thought that we were going to get like a summary of comments and not comments itself, because then we could possibly attribute them. Is there a way to see that summary of comments, or we don't get anything because we're such a small organization?
That would be on what the admin allows you to see. So that would be on Leading Edge's side, and into what comments are provided to you all.
Yeah, Alana, I will follow up. I'll follow up with you and send you a note. I'm pretty sure you all would not have access to them. I think it's small orgs that are under that are over 10, but I'm just going to double check, just because under that threshold is small enough that it would still be usually pretty easy. You probably know how people talk or write about certain things. And so I think that is likely meant to protect confidentiality, but I'll double check and follow up with you. Can you remind me, Alana, which organization you're with?
A Wider Bridge.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So if there's no immediate questions, I will share what is coming next, and then we will stay on the line for any folks who do have additional questions. So just gratitude to those of you for carving out some time in your day to learn a bit more about engagement. Want to share what is coming up. So there's 2 additional sessions that are happening in July. Next week's session is diving deeper again into this topic around engagement, and specifically learning about engagement themes that Liz surfaced today, and going deeper into what we're learning about engagement in our sector and how you can potentially influence it. This will be an interactive session. We will be breaking into small groups to discuss and generate ideas for next steps. So if that is something that appeals to you, we would love to have you back. But if you also have another colleague that you think is going to be driving some of the direct action planning, that could be a nice session for them, because it will be more of a working session. We will then close out the month with a sharing results with staff webinar. We know that folks have a lot of questions about the different ways to share this information with their staff. So we will present some of the materials that you all may be familiar with online, but we create some space to share different samples of how you might go about doing this, and take some questions. And just a reminder that we do have an After Survey Actions website and newsletter that's going out the 3rd week of every month. So you can look for that next week to register for additional sessions that are coming in August. And I'll have Leah, just while we still have folks on, drop the quick feedback form in the chat and ask you all to share your thoughts with us. And like I said, Liz and Leah and I will stay on for a bit, just in case there are any direct questions for the 3 of us.